Secretary O'Brien, welcome. Thank you for your service. I want to welcome our Ukrainian parliamentarians who are here. It's a pleasure to have you in our committee room. It's clear to all of us that the future of Europe, the subject of today's hearing, very much depends upon Ukraine's success against Russia's invasion. That's our top priority and will continue to be our top priority. So I want to talk a little bit about how we got here. And it'll connect to your last point, Secretary O'Brien, dealing with places that want less reliance on Russia that are reaching out to us. What happened in this attack on Ukraine's sovereignty started with the invasion of Crimea and taking over Crimea. And we didn't do anything about that. And before that, Russia invaded Georgia. And we didn't do much about that at all. Russia took over Moldova, Transnistria area. We didn't do much about that. So we have seen Russia's aggression, and we're drawing a line right now in Ukraine, as we should, because they're trying to really take over the entire country. But that's not the only place. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we found another area that Russia has been engaged in. Maybe not directly, but certainly as an enabler, and that's Armenia. I was recently in Armenia, at the border of Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, I can't go to the border because in that area of Armenia that's on the border is now controlled by the Azerbaijanis. How did they get control of that area? Through Russia. Russia allowing them to take that control of territory. What has the international community done about that? Haven't seen very much at all. Haven't seen even a lot of comments about it. So, as you talk about countries that are trying to get closer to the United States, Armenia is one of those countries. And yet, they are now have a real security threat to their borders by being taken by force by Azerbaijan with the complicity of Russia. So tell me what we're doing in order to show our support for the principles that countries cannot change borders by force, and that countries that are reaching out to the United States or the West for a closer relationship, such as Armenia, are not going to be subject to retaliation by Russia without the support of the West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So Armenia is a subject we spend a great deal of time on. So with Secretary Blinken and President von der Leyen, we met with Prime Minister Pashinyan several months ago, established a new platform to help Armenia reduce its dependence on Russia. It's almost entirely dependent on Russia for its energy and its economy. We need to diversify that so that it's able—
And for its border security.
And I'll come to security in just a second. So making it possible for them to make the brave steps that Prime Minister Pashinyan is leading them on, which is a break with Russia. Now, as you point out, Russia had guaranteed Armenia's security after the 2020 war with Azerbaijan and for a long time before then. And it failed. It turned its back as Azerbaijan retook the territory around Nagorno-Karabakh. And that has led to a severe break where much of the population of Armenia wants to get further from Russia. So we're creating the conditions for that to happen. A significant deadline will come later this week when several thousand Russian troops, FSB troops, have been requested to leave. And those are really significant for a number of reasons, in part because they man the border at the international airport, and that's where some of the sanctions smuggling evasion takes place. So we'll see whether Russia is really willing to honor the sovereign wishes of Armenia that it leave so that Armenia can build the relationships that it wants. We're also strongly supporting the peace effort that Prime Minister Pashinyan has been developing with President Aliyev in Azerbaijan.
Which Russia is trying to make sure it doesn't happen.
Russia is trying to make sure that anything that happens there happens on its terms. And I think both of those two countries are a bit frustrated by the involvement, to be honest. And we are working very hard so that the expressed desire of peace can be manifest in an agreement. And I'll just say one more thing about why that matters so much. You look at a map from Central Asia, which is not part of this committee, but Central Asia all the way through. The Central Asian countries are incredibly rich And right now, their only options to the global markets fundamentally are through Russia or China. If we can open up a route that goes through Azerbaijan and Armenia, then they will have access to global markets and much less dependence on Russia and China. So this is all a part, again, of allowing countries to choose their own paths to the global markets.
I appreciate that, and I support everything you just said, but it still begs the question that without much complaint, Azerbaijan is now occupying part of Armenia, strategic part of Armenia. And there has been no real protest about their controlling the highlands next to Nagorno-Karabakh that puts Armenia at tremendous risk of the corridor that could divide the country or lose its southern edge. And I haven't seen much of a fuss made by the international community.
Yes, please, go ahead.
No, I appreciate it, and you're making a fuss here, and I appreciate that. It's good to lay down the marker. The two sides have agreed to a border demarcation process. They've agreed on what the lines are, and you're right, there are some territories that each side still occupies that, according to the line they've agreed, will probably end up going back the other way. The highlands are of particular interest. But that's a process that the two sides are working on. We've been very clear that any adjustment in the border, that the border they've agreed is the one that they should end up with, unless the two sides agree that they don't.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
My understanding, the peace process does not deal with that. The peace.
Well, it does. I mean, there is a peace agreement under negotiation that defers the border demarcation to another channel in the peace process. So you can't just
And I
hive
support
this
that,
off.
but whether
Yeah.
we'll ever get to that point, my concern is going to be years down the road, and we're going to have another Moldova and another Georgia. Thank you, Madam Chair.